So it's been about 6 weeks with the Lowrider S now, put on a little over 800 miles, and I'm feeling more and more confident with each ride, which is really exciting. One of the things I'm still really looking forward to and really haven't done much of with this bike so far is going on some longer rides. Most of the riding I've done so far has just been commuting to or from work and going to see my family, all of which are kind of only about 30-minute rides one way at tops. Thankfully, where I live in the Pacific Northwest, those routes all consist of some pretty scenic back roads, so it's made the daily riding really enjoyable. I get to go through multiple different riding environments, if that makes sense. I get to go through town a little bit, there's some scenic back roads I can take, and then I'll also spend a little bit of time on the freeway, all of which is only about a 25 or 30-minute commute each way for me. So it's been really good practice just getting out there and riding at different speeds and different environments, but ones that I'm familiar with, roads that I'm familiar with, and has given me just a lot more of a base comfort level, I'd say, and making me feel like I'm ready to venture out of town pretty soon on some of the routes that I have picked out and rides for places I'd like to go and explore. I feel like taking a little bit of time to get the bike set up for more of these longer rides is going to pay dividends when it comes to the comfort and enjoyment of actually being out there. So we're back in the garage today for the next installment on the bike build, which is going to be Memphis Shades Road Warrior fairing. And while I do really enjoy the look of the stock fairing, I'm excited to just continue personalizing the bike and making it my own. I know a lot of people out there have the Memphis Shades fairing, so it's kind of hard to call it a unique build, but that's fine with me. So far, I've only done the LED bulbs and caps, and then the exhaust, which both of those are not small things and actually do make probably more of a difference to the look of the bike than I give them credit for. But the fairing is one of the first things you see and was one of the bigger pieces on the bike, so I feel like getting that swapped out will just be one more step towards making it my own. So let's go ahead and get started. So we'll get all these pieces unboxed, kind of lay it out, get an understanding for what the install is going to look like. So let's go ahead and get started taking off the stock fairing. Pull it straight out afterwards. Oh yeah, there we go. All right, now we're gonna take this piece off by removing these two Torx bits down here. And for those who have seen the exhaust install video, you'll understand why, even though I don't really need this swivel head ratchet, I'm gonna use it just because I can now. All right. So the next step is gonna be to remove the headlight bracket itself so that we can then put the headlight extension kit in there. So now we gotta take these two bolts off to remove the headlight, but these guys are kind of in the way and making it kind of cramped. But since I can go ahead and reach this one relatively easily, I'm just gonna pop that guy off to free up space to remove the headlight bracket there. So on second thought, after trying to get the Torx bit in there, it is a little tight. I couldn't quite get it seated all the way flush, and it made me nervous about trying to crank on it. So as it turns out, these little rubber pieces, that wire blocking, instead of trying to remove the whole thing right away, you can actually just push those straight out, and then you have the clearance to get to this bolt. All right, I almost just screwed myself into a massive problem. So being transparent and hoping that others can learn from my mistakes, I wanna share something real fast. It's really hard to get a Torx bit on the back of that because of where the frame is. You really couldn't seat it like 100% straight, and I just stripped the living hell out of one of these Torx bits, like worse than I've ever done probably in my entire life. And so that was pretty close to being a bad mistake, but you can actually take the whole piece off with just 2 Allen bolts under the front, and that is a really easy way to then get at those Torx bits straight on and not even risk what I did, because look at how bad I sincerely fucked that thing up. Well, it seems that every job always has to have at least 1 or 2 hangups, so hopefully that's the last one, hopefully that's the hardest of it, and the rest of the install should just go smooth from here on out. All right, now we will go ahead and use the hardware from Memphis Shades to extend the headlight so that it can actually fit the fairing properly. And then we're only gonna do all of these hardware pieces just snug enough to stay on right now, because we want to be able to move it like this so that when we put the fairing on, we can actually make sure the headlight is in its proper position. So looks like we are done with that, and we can go ahead and move on to putting the brackets on for the fairing. For the mounting hardware for the fairing itself are these kind of ring pieces. They come apart in the middle, and then you just choose the diameter for which one works best, and then they snap back together, and then you just bolt them back in the rear. And they say these are supposed to be about 2 inches apart. So I measured that, 2 inches done, and we'll move on to what's next. So this part's really easy. Just taking the hardware apart, putting the grommets inside the fairing itself. These rubber grommets just push through pretty easily. We'll just push the hardware through the front of the fairing and then attach the bracket like so. Now we're ready to actually go ahead and install the fairing on the bike, which is cool. They have these kind of quick release levers of sorts. So we'll see how I did here on fitting. And this is where it's good that we left everything loose, because this is gonna take some finessing to kind of get it exactly how everything is supposed to line up. Not too bad for first try though. I think I got this seated properly. Need to adjust the headlight a little bit, so there might be a little bit more finessing, but we'll go ahead and tighten the hardware for these guys, and then probably take the fairing itself back off so that we can adjust the headlight and make sure that's all tightened back there. So we'll see how this quick release works. It's just 2 tabs, one on either side of the top mount, and then look at that. That's pretty awesome. So make adjusting the headlight really convenient. So if I don't get it right first try, should be no problem to just pop it off and wiggle it around until we're looking how we want to be. And hopefully this doesn't take me a million tries to get it right, but we'll see how we do. I'm actually not going to go all the way tight, just because I can easily throw the fairing back on, check it, and then if it is indeed correct, pop the fairing back off, because that is so easy, and then go ahead and fully tighten these. All right, I think I got the headlight leveled about as good as I'm gonna get it without actually going out and riding. And if I need to adjust, at least now I know how, and it is super easy. So we're gonna go ahead and put the little, I guess, mini shroud or cover for the headlamp that they give you, and then pretty much be on our way. All right, I think the fairing's ready to go on for the final time, hopefully. And now, last but not least, we can finally attach our windscreen or windshield to the fairing. Well, it's been about 4 weeks with the new fairing on now, and I figured I'd circle around, just share a couple of my first impression and even short-term review type thoughts, because things did turn out a little bit different than I had planned. So a few notes on the look of the fairing. Damn, people are racing on this street right now. So a few quick notes on the look of the fairing. I'm very pleased with how it turned out. I really like how it looks aesthetically. And of course, I've seen this fairing on the Lowrider S before online, so I sort of knew what to expect, but it's really nice to be able to enjoy having one of my own now. So I have to confess, I actually did make a mistake when ordering the fairing. My intention was to get the most blacked out windscreen you can get, which is why I went with the 11-inch instead of anything bigger. Partially why I went with the 11-inch instead of anything bigger, just because you don't get the option to get the fully blacked out look anything larger than 11 inches. But frankly, I just must have made an error when adding it to the cart, because I ended up with the dark smoke tint or something instead of the blacked out smoke. I can't remember the exact terminology or titles of what they call it on the Memphis Shades website. But in hindsight, I'm actually not too upset about that, just because I think, you know, it still fits the look of the blacked out bike, and then it's not a massive difference. I mean, it's noticeable for sure, but it's not massive. And I kind of like now that there is a little bit more of a gradation. It's nice to just kind of mix it up and not have it be totally monotoned, you know, and in some ways, the windshield now almost matches sort of the black tone of the pipe a little bit more. You know, obviously the bike is, you know, a pretty dark, rich black, and these are a little bit more of a matte or a little bit more of a shade. And color options aside, I would probably still go with the 11-inch again anyway. I just kind of think it's the best looking size on the bike personally. The 13-inch is still cool too, but the 11-inch is kind of the sweet spot for me. So speaking of the size of the fairing, let's talk about the functionality of it. My first impression of it, I would not say is bad by any means. It's just different. I was not really bothered too much riding with the little stock fairing or whatever. I don't even think Harley calls it a fairing, but you know, the fact that the wind was on my chest and you know, some road noise and stuff was not really that bothersome for me. But I was looking forward to what I thought would really reduce a lot of that. And in some ways it has, you know, this fairing certainly does get the wind off of your chest. Anything, I would say for me personally, like shoulders or below, it disperses that pretty much entirely. I think my expectations were probably just set a little too high as far as what this setup is gonna do for wind buffeting. And you could credit that just to my lack of prior experience on these type of motorcycles. I really thought that this fairing would pretty much eliminate all the wind, but it doesn't do that. You know, just for reference, I am about 5'11" in that neighborhood, and from what I looked at online, the fairings you're supposed to get to really reduce all of the wind buffeting and get that to pass completely over you or to the sides of you. You want to be looking kind of just above the windshield, and with this being the 11-inch, as I mentioned, you know, my line of sight, I kind of probably ride more like this realistically than perfectly straight up, but I definitely am still looking way above the windshield, which I like from the riding standpoint and visibility. You know, you don't want to be looking through it at all. I am still happy with the size that I went with. Between the combination of the fairing, windshield height, my own personal height, again, being sort of like 5'11", maybe hovering on 6 foot, and then the particular helmet that I have, it does tend to push the wind pretty much right to the top of my visor, top of my helmet area and over. The physical sensations of the wind buffeting actually don't bother me. The part that does bother me is the wind noise. It's hard to draw an exact comparison, but I would say even anything over 20 miles an hour, but then certainly when you're on the freeway and you know you're doing 70 plus, it gets really loud. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but again, it's not something that is really that much of a deterrent for me. I didn't really enjoy it the first handful of days that I had it on, but now that it's been a month plus, I've kind of just gotten used to it. I do think that, you know, for longer ride, I maybe would experiment with earplugs just to reduce the mental taxation that not much wind noise can be. I'm not quite sure, again, what it is, where the wind hits my helmet in particular, but I've noticed if I dip my head too much, I get almost like a screeching sound. That's the horrible part. So, because I kind of know just to like lift my chin a little bit. I have read that, you know, you can play around with raising where the fairing mounts are on the forks. My mounts for the fairing are already as high as they can go. I also played around angling the fairing forward or backward a little bit. I think mine is mostly as far forward as I can get it now, along with just being as high up on the actual mounts themselves. But it is what it is. Like I said, I've grown used to it at this point, so it doesn't really bother me. I'm planning on doing some of my longer rides I keep hinting at here in the very near future. So I might play around with the earplugs, but for now, I'm still happy with how it is, and it's still an addition rather than not having it.